Hey y'all! Well, got our amp in front of us we're working on, but that's not our review. We're doing the AT33 Mono and why you may want to get a mono phono cartridge. And I didn't even realize this was a thing until I recently got some albums that a viewer had recommended. Sorry I don't know your name, but almost every week you put out a really cool jazz recording in the comments of my Monday monologue, and I think you say just jazz album for the week. And you put it out there, and I've been paying attention, and I've bought several of them. And these two in particular, I got off Acoustic Sounds. This was Miles Davis, Someday My Prince Will Come, which is an early Miles Davis. And then the other one is Rollins Plays for the Bird, or Rollins Plays for Bird. That's what it is. Sonny Rollins. And both of these are really fun jazz albums. I listened to the streaming a little bit, thought they were really awesome, so it's like, I'm going to try the vinyl, because normally I personally like vinyl better than streaming. It just sounds more engaging to me. So, bought these two albums, and it was interesting that the Miles Davis one had a big sticker on the front of it that said mono. And I'm like, well, I know a lot of that stuff back then was recorded in mono, or it was, what do they call it, folded over into mono. They might have recorded it on 2-track, but then they made a mono pressing out of it, because at that time there was a lot of mono stuff and stereo was just kind of getting started, and some of those old guys weren't great at mastering in stereo. They knew how to do mono really well, so they just stuck with it. And over the years, a lot of those 2-track recordings had gotten separated and pressed as stereo. And like Kenny Burrell Midnight Blue, you can tell that it was likely a 2-track recording, because 100% of the guitar comes out of one speaker and 100% of the saxophone comes out of the other. And there's no bleed over at all. And if you listen to it on headphones, it's like, whoa, because it's like it's all in one ear and then it's all in the other. And I know y'all have heard some of these early stereo albums where it was almost like they were doing a demonstrator for the stereo system, where they would like pan back and forth from speaker to speaker, and so you could really, listen to that stereo, it's separated. They weren't about trying to make the sound stage and all the stuff that we're used to today. And so, yeah, it wasn't ideal. And it, again, most of it was designed or recorded on a 2-track deck to be folded into a mono pressing, and a lot of them were. And some of the really early stuff, they actually would have a mono tape deck and a stereo 2-track and record them separately. And a lot of audiophiles will say like the mono recording's better than the stereo or even the 2-track folded into one. But irregardless of all that, we're here to talk about this phono cartridge. So I got these mono pressings, and they're from the Prestige label. And Acoustic Sounds has a whole catalog of, they have some stereos, but they have a lot of mono pressings too. And on a mono, the needle is only reading the back and forth, right? There's no up and down, movement in the groove. And the needle wasn't, made to move that way. And the pure mono cartridges had no vertical compliance at all. They would only move left and right. And, the tone arm might move up and down a little bit, but it would destroy a stereo record if you put a OG mono cartridge on it, because the needle would only move back and forth, and any of the vertical information would just get smushed down by the needle. And they usually ran at a fairly high weight on the needle because they wanted it to stay in the groove and not skip. And all they had to do was move back and forth. So they could put 10 or 12, 15 grams on the needle, and it wasn't any big deal because it just had to track side to side. So back to listening to these albums. So put them on my turntable and put my stereo cartridge on it. And this was before I did some research on this. And first of all, there was a ton of surface noise, which for a audiophile kind of grade record, I wasn't used to. Those Blue Note stereo, they're almost silent, on the lead in or in between the tracks and stuff. And you can even hear the surface noise when the music's playing. I mean, it was loud enough where it was, it wasn't hugely distracting, but you could hear it. But the bigger problem was that it just sounded kind of distorted. And I'm not sure exactly how to describe it. It just sounded kind of fuzzy, let's say. And it wasn't crisp. And at first I put that off too. Well, this is just an old recording. It's not very good. And I have some older vinyl that I cleaned up that I'm pretty sure are mono recordings that sound the same way. They just sound kind of fuzzy and, they're not crisp, and there's a lot of surface noise. Not, beyond just the little crackles. I mean, it's just kind of just the whole time. And it just wasn't that impressive, even though I really liked the music, right? So started doing some research and realized that because of the way the music is recorded or put on a mono pressing, there is going to be a lot of noise down at the bottom of the groove because the cartridge isn't supposed to be picking up any of that. It's only supposed to be picking up the left and right. So there's, vertical noise down in the bottom of the groove. They don't care because it's not supposed to be picking it up. It's only supposed to be in the horizontal direction, not the vertical. And the other thing is that the micro line stylus that works really good with stereo basically goes down in the bottom of that groove, and it just picks up everything that it's not supposed to be picking up. And so, I looked at some of the cheaper options. I think the Ortofon, people were saying they're more like the sum to stereo, where it's basically the stereo cartridge and they just tie the sides together. And I think a lot of the lower end mono cartridges are made like that. But this moving coil Auto Technica, and not cheap, but it's not stupid expensive. It was like a $300 cartridge. I mean, my really good stereo one was $600, so it was like half the price of that. And it is a moving coil, and from the description, that the coils, instead of in a V, they're done horizontally, so that it does just pick up the horizontal direction, and the vertical compliance is just the stylus moving a little bit. And this does have vertical compliance, unlike those really old mono cartridges. So you could listen to stereo vinyl on this and not destroy the record. Those earlier ones would. They would just basically smear out and erase the vertical stereo information on the vinyl. So I'm sure what you're here for is, what does it sound like? Man, it sounds great. It fixed all of that stuff that I was complaining about at the start of the video. The surface noise was just gone. Like, it's some of the quietest vinyl I've ever listened to. And I'm sure it's because there's nothing picking up the vertical compliance or, the rumble or anything that you would get with a stereo cartridge. And it's only picking up the left and the right. All that distortion was gone, the fuzziness, it's clear. And what's amazing to me for being a mono, presentation is how much soundstage there still is and how much depth there is to the sound. I mean, I'm sure just depending on your systems and speakers and setup and all that stuff, how much of that you're going to hear, but it wasn't just like a flat 2D. It wasn't like looking at a 2D picture versus a 3D picture like I was expecting. It really sounds good. And honestly, I feel like it's more representative of what the artist and the person recording it intended it to sound like. And so you're hearing that. And when you think about it, when you go to a jazz club, they're usually not spread out all over the stage. It's not like you have the bass player over here and the guy on the sax over here and all that. Usually they're like on a little small stage kind of in a corner of the room, and they're all kind of like stacked on top of each other, and the sound's just coming from that one space, which is mono. And it gives that kind of central sound club atmosphere ambiance to the recording. And I know, some of you out there, you're like, you spent $300 to listen to a couple of recordings so they sound good, instead of just going, well, I'll just stream that, or whatever, other solution may have been. But I think there's something special about these mono recordings. Enough where I went and bought about 6 more of these mono discs from Prestige, so I can listen to them with this mono cartridge. And I've got some older vinyl that I need to clean up that I know are mono pressings from back in the day, and give them another try and see what they sound like. And so, yeah, for you folks that have turntables, and especially if you've got a moving coil compatible phono stage, like mine is that I use my tube one that I sell, but I have a step-up transformer with it. This works good. It puts out, it's a low output, but it's not like super low. So it's pretty easy to use Phono Cartridge. And the really cool thing is the VTA, the vertical tracking on the cartridge. The stack height of the head with the cartridge to the needle was almost exactly 2 millimeters less on this than my OC9 XML. And so I've got a speed test disc, which I'll put in the description below, that's like 2 millimeters thick. So I was able to just stick it under the rubber mat, put the rubber mat on, and get the right VTA without having to adjust between the two cartridges. And then, amazingly enough, this suggests running this at around 2.5 grams. And when I switch between the two carts, the other cart's enough lighter where it comes out at 1.8, and this is at 2.5 without having to touch anything. So to switch between stereo and mono, I just changed the head shell out with the other cartridge, put the spacer underneath the mat, and we're ready to listen to mono recordings. And then don't have to touch the counterweight or anything. So that turned out really sweet. And so, yeah, I think there is something special to this mono stuff. And I know people say that you can just sum the mono, or if your preamp has a mono switch on it or whatever, that people online are saying you get like 90% of it. Guys, you don't. You really need this whole, ignore the vertical movement of the stylus kind of cartridge that only is listening to the left and right, to get away from that surface noise and distortion and fuzziness and all that listening to a mono recording, an actual mono pressing on a stereo cartridge sounds like. And put in the comments below if you know of other cartridges that do this, only left to right measurement, and it's not one of these, V measuring or V-shaped coil cartridges that have the outputs tied together into mono. Because I think that is what makes this cartridge special. And I think there's some real higher end ones too. You can put that in the comments too if you know, review some of the higher end ones that you really like. But for you guys that are vinyl heads and you have some mono stuff, or you want to see what this mono thing is all about, go to Acoustic Sounds, go look at the Prestige mono recordings, pick up one of these, and have fun listening to mono. So anyway, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe, please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon supporters and other folks that support the channel with donations at my website. I really appreciate all you guys. We normally do a lot of tube DIY stuff, but I like doing reviews every once in a while, and this was so cool I thought this was worth sharing. So until the next video, have a nice day.